So welcome to Questions to Candidates. Basically, what it is we're going to ask you guys questions about the role, situations you might be put in, bits and bobs like that. What will happen is I will read out a question, and then I will go, for example, like, Helen, can you tell us about it first? And then you get to talk on the question for a minute. Charlie will be keeping time. So she'll hold up the big orange one when you've got 10 seconds left, and the red one when time's up and you need to stop talking. Otherwise, I'm going to have to cut you off, and that feels really mean. Do you guys have any questions before we start?
We've got a QR code so that you can put in a Mentimeter question. If we've got time, then we will get through as many questions as we can. Any unasked questions were sent to the candidates afterwards. They can use them as they wish.
And that's it. So it feels very, very weird to be on the other side of this. So we're going to start by asking you to deliver your 1 minute statement, and we're going to start with Helen.
Okay, is this loud enough? We good? Okay, hi everyone, I'm Helen. I'm a final year sociology student. I think my big thing is that I want to push for everyone's voice to be heard. I believe that no one should be held back by things out of their control. So I want to push for improvements to assessment and exams, promote accessibility and inclusivity. I want to strengthen academic communities, that's a big one for me. I want to prioritize student well-being, and finally, I just really want to push for student voices. Thank you.
Gorgeous. Then we have Robbie.
Okay, so hello, my name's Robbie. Obviously, I'm a fourth year, final year maths student here at Bath. The manifesto is up already. It's got lots and lots of points that it will cover things like improving lecture recordings and access to past papers and changing online unit evaluations. Lots and lots of points on there. There is also lots of detail behind those points that's not on the manifesto. So I'd like to encourage you all to come up, ask questions about any of the points, obviously ask questions today. Yeah.
And last but not least, Star.
Hi, I'm Star, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a fourth year French and Russian student. Throughout my time in university, I've seen many people give up due to not being able to access everything, or just from the lack of material due to everything getting on top of them. I've also seen people break down due to education standards not being high enough. So I just want to make sure that everyone can access everything, everyone can do the best they can, and they can be the star of their own performance, so to speak. I know, it's great, all the puns. But equally, you guys are the most important when it comes to education. Make sure you get what you deserve.
Okay, wonderful. So your first question for all the candidates is, you've all had such amazing and varied experience across the university and the SU alike. Can you tell us what made you specifically go for the role of education officer, and how you think your previous roles and experience have prepared you for this? And we're starting with Robbie.
So I've been involved in a lot of the student voice stuff over the last few years. So specifically education, I've been academic rep for the last few years, and more recently faculty rep as well. So that's allowed me to kind of get really involved with education matters within the faculty, but also across the university as a whole. So for me, really going for education specifically is a no-brainer. Yeah, done lots of stuff. Being able to improve lecture recording quality and loads of stuff, working with academic reps, representing various issues, and going to Summit and being part of academic exec and so much more.
Okay, then it's Helen.
Okay, so I got really involved with Student Voice this year. I became an academic rep. I joined Summit and was even elected as the vice chair of Summit by its members. For those who don't know, Summit is it's a group of student leaders who are shaping the political direction of the student union. In my role, especially as vice chair, it's just allowed me to hear the issues that people have with education, and I've been so inspired to try and do what I can. I've already passed a standpoint on late submission penalties. I've got a statement of issue being discussed about IMCs and extensions. So I just really want to continue that work and push for positive change and listen to what you guys have to say.
And start.
So in my time, I've had many meetings just in my department about how they can adapt their course to allow for disabled students to access it more easily, or actually do assessments. I also have contacts at other universities doing education sectors, and I have been a part of some research looking at autism and language acquisition, so that kind of links. And for the past 2 years, I've been part of the committee for Disability Action Group, so we're all about making sure everything is accessible. I've focused a lot more on the education side, making sure we've got disability action plans in place, making sure IMC claims are easy to understand, looking at how we can make everything easier for you guys to actually get the full stuff.
Neat. So our second question is, this is something we've seen for years and years, and this year is absolutely no exception, and that is the issue of lecture recordings. I wanted to know if any of you have any new or niche ways you would want to tackle this issue, and we're starting with Star.
Okay, so one key thing I find of lecture recordings is they're not picking up the voices correctly, as especially in a language degree, you notice that what they're saying is not what's recorded. So one way we can work around that is using the inbuilt function in PowerPoint and other presentation software that auto-generates the subtitles. That's an easy way of avoiding that. Another thing is making sure that people know how to access it and use Panopto to the full extent as possible, as a lot of lecturers are like, I don't know how to do this, I'm not going to, or it's like, oh, it's good enough for me, it should be fine, but equally they're not consulting the people that it benefits the most and affects the most, having bad qualities and making sure that all the equipment is up to date and good quality as well.
And then it's Helen.
Okay, I think, my approach would be to, I think something I've had a lot is microphones not being used. So I think in the case of the quality of lecture recordings, making sure that's done. But in the implementation of lecture recordings, I think a big one, at least in my degree, has been like sensitive topics being discussed. So I don't know if it could be spoken to lecturers about reducing the time frame that recordings are available. I think it's just good to speak to lecturers to see why they don't want to, and just facilitate discussions with students and staff so that staff can understand why students need it, and so students can understand why in some cases it's not possible. But I really want to push for lecture recordings because they are so important. Thank you.
And then Robbie.
Yeah, so there's no easy fix. We're in a position now where a lot of lectures still aren't recorded, so that really needs to be the priority to get lectures recorded. I mean, they are obviously so important. I'm sure we could sit here all day talking about how important lecture recordings are. But yeah, so that needs to be a real priority, making sure that they're all finally recorded. And it's not going to be easy, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to get that. But there's also plenty of other issues with lecture recordings at the moment that need to be improved. So it's things like the release of lecture recordings and how soon after your lecture you get it, and quality of lecture recordings as well. If you've ever experienced being in really small rooms and watching them back and seeing the lecturers write on the whiteboard, you can't see what they're writing, that's a real problem. So that's something I've been working on this year actually. But yeah, so no easy fix, but we need to work towards it.
The next thing that we're going to touch on is another common theme across your manifestos, which is transparency and student representation in decision making. Specifically, we'd like to know how you would like to see students involved in decision making and closing this feedback loop. And we're going to go Helen, Star, Robbie.
Okay, I think feedback is just such an important thing. Online unit evals, obviously being at the end of the semester, sometimes aren't as productive as they could be. I think that more informal discussions of feedback between students and staff could be so beneficial. Just creating clear communication channels. And also just encouraging students to get involved with student voice. In my first few years at uni, I wasn't able to because of personal restrictions. But this year, I've really learned the power of having a voice, and I'm able to implement change, and I want to encourage other people to get into that too.
So for me, feedback is a crucial part of how a university functions, because we need to tailor how we're teaching to the students, and the best way of doing that is the feedback. So making sure that there are clear channels, whether it's anonymous forums, whether there's like weekly coffee chats, or informal but also formal ways of providing feedback to lecturers, to director of studies, to higher ups is key, and making sure that we know how the feedback's being is being worked on. That's the word. Looking at maybe having like weekly updates of how something's working, and making sure that people know how to be heard.
Yeah, so I think put student voice at the centre of everything we do. It's so important. All the stuff we're going to talk about today is issues that affect a large number of students, majority of students. So it's really important that people engage with this and bring these issues forward so that we can make a change. I think there's stuff we could do within the student union to improve that and to improve engagement with student voice. So things like creating dedicated student voice social media channels and really going for that. But then, we also need to improve feedback methods within departments and official ones. So looking at online unit evaluations, I think there's a lot of room to improve them. Not many people engage with them at the moment, so that's something we can do. And also particularly extending them to after the end of exams, so you have a chance to actually feedback on your exams. It's a really important part of your unit. Yeah.
So this has also already been briefly mentioned, but all of you sit on Summit, which is basically like our council in the SU. This means you've seen quite a few policies known as standpoints in Summit pass through. Are there any standpoints or policies you're looking forward to pursuing in the role? And we're going to go Robbie, Helen, Star.
Yeah, I'm really excited actually about this incremental penalty system for late submission policies, as Helen's just smiling. I think that would be fantastic if we could get that forward. And you imagine the scenario where you hand in your course like a minute late and they half your grade, and that's really not fair. So I think other universities do it. We should push towards that. There's other stuff that's been passed at Summit. We had a great statement about trans inclusivity and some of the stuff that would go on there. So that's maybe bigger picture, but yeah, lots of good things going on at Summit.
So me next up, yeah. So obviously I'm quite keen to delve further into the things that I've raised and that have passed. For example, the incremental policies. Also in our next meeting, as I said briefly earlier, there's one on IMCs and extensions and just making these fairer, more accessible, improving the feedback. Be keen, if that does pass, to hopefully work on that, because that's something I'm very passionate about. And again, with the trans inclusion, that's the other one that has passed. And just improving the digital databases. And also engagement monitoring, and just making sure that that remains an element of student well-being. And nothing else.
Yeah, so the ones I'm looking forward to the most are the ones to do with IMCs and extensions, because I've had multiple extensions. I've applied for IMCs. Not all of them have gone through, even though the reasons I have been told are very valid. Everyone has unexpected circumstances. Everyone eventually does need an extension, but they are more aimed towards people with disabilities or that do struggle academically, and not everyone is given that opportunity to get them. The other one that I'm looking forward to working on would be the engagement monitoring, making sure that it's not being used as a penalative manner, as some, even though lecturers do care about our well-being and all that, sometimes their emails that they send across seem very aggressive, that we've not been in lectures, even though we've just been doing it for our own health reasons.
Okay, so I'm really glad you guys are enthusiastic about IMCs, because that's what our next question's about. So through your other roles, such as on Summit, being an academic rep, being in the DAG committee, you've been involved in the IMC review. I would adore to know what you think of the current progress of this review, and if there is anything more you would want to see enforced. And we're going to go in the same order of Robbie, Helen, Star.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of good things that have already come out of the IMC review, so I probably don't know the specifics too much, but it's things like not requiring death certificates for proving that, and lowering burden and making it easier and more accessible. A lot of people at the moment don't know how to submit an IMC, don't know how to submit an extension. The amount of times people ask me, oh, how do I submit an extension? Don't know, right? You first thing is to start emailing people, emailing DOS, and it's too late. So there needs to be clearer messaging around that. It needs to be easier to do. Being told whether or not it's been accepted earlier before your exam, if possible, that's could be really useful as well. You don't want to be in the situation where you've applied for an IMC, but then you don't know whether it's going to get accepted. So you're stressing about the exam still. But yeah, lots of exciting things.
I think for me, a big part of the review is the evidence thing. It can be really hard to find evidence. I've experienced it with mental health. How do you give evidence of mental health other than appointments or GP appointments, which can be hard to get as well? Another thing is just improving the accessibility of things like phrase banks, because they do make it so much easier to go through the IMC process. I think another thing is just standardizing how it's done across departments. For example, like some have Microsoft Forms, some are emails, and just standardizing it to make it as approachable and accessible and not a scary thing. And again, with me personally pushing for one of my things in the SOI is increasing the deadline, just because it's really difficult at the moment.
Yes, so the favourite thing about the IMC so far is the phrase bank that Amber's worked on. I love it because a lot of the time it's really about phrasing. So I know one of my IMCs was declined because, in their words, it was too much like a complaint. So it was more about not necessarily what it was, but how it's phrased. Related to IMCs, I am actually in the process of working with psychology department about how they are communicating that IMCs exist, how you can get them, and make sure that it's clear for students there. But equally, it needs to be clear to students everywhere, because IMCs affect everyone, and we cannot always control how we're doing it, and maybe even having you can go, I need an IMC, then filling out the data later when you're in a better state of mind might be beneficial.
Okay, so another common theme is help for widening participation students. I would particularly like to know what specific help you would want to see for disabled and neurodivergent students, as these are the ones that are most commonly named in your manifestos. And we're going Helen, Star, and then Robbie. Need it repeating? Do you want it repeating?
I think I'll link this to improving academic communities and just making sure that there are inclusive spaces, making sure that things are accessible, again, promoting lecture recordings. I don't even know, sensory study spaces, which are so important. Sorry, I'm kind of blanking on the understanding of this question.
Did you need it repeating? You're all good. Yeah, so another common theme across your manifestos is help for widening participation students. And you specifically name disabled and neurodivergent students. What specific help would you want for these students?
Yeah, so I'll stick with what I said about the academic communities, and again, improving accessibility, lecture recordings, but also just, to be fair, I think what I said is what I would stand by for that, sorry. Just making sure that services are accessible. For example, the disability service can get quite hectic around examination periods. Just, yeah, working towards.
No, it's so fine. It's a big question. It was Star next.
So this is one of my favourite bits because I love talking about disability. You might be able to guess, but a key thing that I've discussed with lecturers is DAPs. A lot of students don't know how to get a DAP or what DAPs are. A lot of lecturers don't even know they exist or they don't know enough information about it. So I'd focus on streamlining the process of getting a DAP and actually making it so a lot of people can. As for the past 2 years, there's been issues with people getting DAPs because disability service have been booked up consistently in the start of semester, and it ends up being about halfway through. You can get one, which is not ideal. And I've also would advocate for more sensory-friendly study spaces, making them be more adaptable, making them be somewhat permanent locations, as well as making sure lecture recordings are good quality, making sure DAPs are being followed, and making sure lecture materials are accessible, as that is a key point as well.
Okay, so this is not something that's explicitly in my manifesto. It's not. The reason it's not in there because it's not something I've got a lot of personal experience with. It's not something I'm familiar with, so I don't want to go around getting meetings and stuff that I don't know about. But it is a very important issue, obviously, and going into this role, I'd be looking forward to working with people like Star who are on disability action groups and really listening to students about what their concerns around these issues are. There is things we can probably do. At the moment, a lot of lecturers don't follow DAPs, so disability action plans. So we can do work to make sure they actually follow those. And you look at the stats of the number of students who have lecture recordings on their DAPs. That's a big issue. So that's another reason to push lecture recordings. And there's stuff we can do in there to improve the accessibility of lectures and teaching.
Okay, neat. So it's already been sprinkled in there a little bit, but I would like to know if you guys can tell me what your understanding of what an academic community is. So if you had to try to explain to someone who had never heard of it before what an academic community is, in a minute, what would you say? And we're going to start with Star, and then we're going to go on to Robbie and Helen.
Okay, so to me, an academic community is people that study. So anyone, whether it's like a postgraduate or if you're neurodivergent and a student, or if you've got anything that affects your studies, that I count as an academic community. But equally, as a university, we are one big academic community. So making sure that we are always inclusive is key. And for more academic communities, we don't want to separate them too much, as that can be seen as we're trying to be inclusive, but we're also being more separative, which is not ideal. So the academic communities are a big thing, and they can go down a rabbit hole like you can with many things. But the key thing is people that study are always part of the academic community, and it's also how you study and what affects your studies as well.
So it's a big thing, isn't it? It can mean lots of different things. Obviously, it can be anything from small groups of people working together on the same subject. It kind of larger whole departments, massive groups of students, right? The key thing is really in academic communities, people bonding and getting together over their shared academic interests and stuff that, you know, they do day to day. So yeah, it's difficult to really define what it is, but some subjects, some departments are already very good at this, others not so. So it's looking at initiatives that we can do kind of across the board and standardizing the way we do these things.
So for me, academic communities are a big part of my manifesto. I think I really want to strengthen that across the university. For me, academic communities are improving the communication between students and students, for one, making sure that people know others on their course and can interact and feel safe and included. But also communication between staff and students, making sure that there are those communication channels. I think a big part of that is making sure everyone feels represented. For example, I know lots of, well, there should be more, but there's EDI committees. I know computer science has an EDI committee, and I just think that's fantastic for making sure everyone does feel truly represented, to make sure that there's no issues regarding representation. Just making sure everyone feels safe and included and represented on their course and in Bath. Thank you.
Okay, Ace, I'm now going to give you a couple of situational questions, which means they're a bit longer. So if you need them repeating, just go, huh? Can you repeat that? So the first one is, as a former student, you have no doubt been in numerous group chats, meaning your number is available and out on the web. Well, hopefully not out on the web. It's in a WhatsApp group somewhere. You're doom scrolling one night when you're suddenly messaged by a distressed student you've never met before who needs help but doesn't know where to start. What do you do? And we're going to go in the order of Robbie, Star, then Helen.
Okay, so that's a tricky one. Obviously, first thing is to set expectations and say, yeah, I'm not gonna, so I can point you towards the right place, so I can help you, but, you know, yeah, it's listening to what their problem is, and is going to be highly dependent on what that is, to where you, kind of how you help them, whether you know a particular area that can help them, give them support, or whether it's something that actually you've worked on before, you know the answer to. So it's highly situational, I think, how you deal with that, but it's, yeah, important to actually engage with them and listen to them and try and work with them to solve it.
Okay, so I've actually already faced this as part of DAG. So I tend to, first of all, go, okay, do you want to send me an email? Just write down everything you can think of to do with this. Just send it to me. You can arrange to meet up, have a coffee, you know, have some lunch, you know, an informal setting, so we can, and then we can dive into what the issues are, and we can work out a plan of how we can tackle them. I would also make sure that I've got resources available for here's how you can issue complaints about people. Here's how to word things correctly. Looking at email templates, which is on my manifesto, making sure we've got good ways of communicating issues and the module changes or other stuff. So it's just listening, but also putting that boundary of I can help to a certain extent, but I can't do everything for you.
Okay. When you say distressed, and so my first immediate thought is signposting. I wouldn't be sure how equipped I would be to deal in a situation like that, because that's something that ultimately requires training. I'd be as much help as I could be in the situation, but ultimately I would signpost to student support. There's also support in the report. Just let them know that they can be heard by people who can properly help them. But yeah, just be I want to be someone who you can feel reassured by and be a friendly face. So hopefully that would help.
Okay, we've got a more technical situational question now, so like less of a well, maybe a bit of an ethical dilemma. But part of being education officer is also being a governor of the university. This means that you often have to wear multiple quote unquote hats. So you have to take a point of view as someone who's representing students, but you may also have to take like the point of view of somebody who is governor of the university, got their finances and stuff in mind. How do you think you would handle a situation where the two opinions or options clash, such as, for example, increasing student rents or bursary changes? And we're going to go Star, Robbie, then Helen.
So I'd first tackle that by writing down on 2 pieces of paper all the things that points out from a student's perspective this affects, and all the things from a governor perspective it affects, and then start somewhat pairing it up, seeing if there's like one of those like students don't gain as much income, but and it's like but the university needs income, pairing them up and seeing if there's a compromise between them, whether it's we do raise them, but we don't raise them as much. But equally, sometimes it's we have to think university needs to be able to survive, and even though students are essential for that, sometimes the changes need to be implemented that students may not like to begin with, but they need to be in place for students in the long term.
It's me, right? So the important thing is the best possible scenario is when the university and the students are working together and they're both succeeding, right? So the university is going to do better when students feel supported and looked after, and then the students are ultimately going to benefit from when the university is performing successfully. So it's important to bear both of those things in mind. You can't go one way or the other, right? So yeah, it's thinking about how we can benefit both parties to get a good thing. I mean, something like rents, increases student rents, I'm pretty sure that's ring-fenced, right? So hopefully in that scenario it wouldn't be something where the university is increasing them for profit. But yeah, working together, I think we're the strongest when the university and the students are.
Obviously a big part of the role is being the voice for students, so I would want to make sure that those points are recognised. But in those matters, I feel like the university does everything in students' best interest. So ultimately, it would just be a case of ensuring that students are cared about in these decisions. Again, making sure that students' voices are heard on these matters and are taken into consideration. But then putting these forward to make sure that the decisions made are the best they can be and have good reasoning.
I swear there's sneaky ways around it. So here's a submitted question. How would you tackle the problem of really late and really early lectures? We all already struggle to fit all students within that timetable, and the university is trying to grow. And this is going to go Robbie, Helen, Star.
Okay, so this is happening, if you don't know, because courses are expanding, and we've got limited lecture space, so it's all getting booked out, and the only place to put it is either in these really early or really late slots. There is a long-term solution to that, which is making sure we've got more teaching space and we're not over-recruiting departments, students. So that's something to work towards. In terms of short-term solutions, right, there are things we can do to mitigate this. There's alternative compromises we can make. So some departments already do it. They have lectures online or they split cohorts. So that's something we can look at. And yeah, there's other things to kind of mitigate these circumstances, right? So if you have a really early lecture, we could come up with policies where you'll finish earlier in the day, so you won't have the evening ones, or if you have a late lecture, you'll start later, and do things like asking to extend the U2, so because that's a big issue.
I thought I was going to have to cut you off, sorry. It was Helen next.
Okay. Yeah, so again, in increasing the spaces on campus to ensure that these early lectures and late lectures can't happen is a long-term thing. Well, students don't want online lectures. Sometimes it can be an issue of travel, so live streaming lectures, so that there is the option to go in person, but also, because traveling at that time is difficult, but also with the later ones, having lecture recordings is, and the morning ones, sorry. Lecture recordings are just imperative in this sense. For example, as a student who has worked part-time during course, a 6 p.m. lecture isn't possible to attend in person at that time. So it's really important that these lectures are recorded so students can do it in their own time.
Yeah, so it boils down to can we get to campus easily enough, and are people going to be alive enough to do it? The reason why it's done is purely because of space and time, because not every lecturer has got 24 hours a day to be able to work. So making sure that people know the reasons why is a key thing, but also maybe implementing that as a hybrid, that you can join online, you can be in person for like seminars, for lectures, they can be live streamed, got to make sure the recording's accessible very quickly afterwards, or making them asynchronous, so it's we've got if you can't come to the class, that's fine. Here's everything we're going to look at. Here's some resources to help you answer these questions, just to make you start thinking of how you can approach this topic.
Ace. So this is another chunky question, and I swear we're nearing the end. So if you need this one repeating again, just say so. Over the past year, the SU and the university have been working on reviewing academic representation, with one of the proposed changes being the introduction of department reps. How will you ensure the successful implementation of this role and integrate them into current structures? And that's going to go Star, Robbie, Helen.
So one way we can easily implement it is by having multiple different levels of representation. So it can start off with the department reps, which then report to the faculty reps, which then report to the higher ups in the academic side. So making sure that we've got representatives that A, are friendly, B, you feel can accurately advocate for what you're asking for, and making sure that no matter what, that everything is clear, that there's proper structures, so that all the faculty reps have access to the departments that are in their faculty team, essentially, and making sure that there is a paper trail, because that paper trail makes things easier to understand.
So I'm really, really excited for this, bringing department reps. I've been a faculty rep this year, as I said earlier, and it's been so difficult trying to engage with reps and figure out what the issues are in certain departments when there's not someone in that department who I can talk to directly and engage with them. So I'm be really excited to bring this in and have department reps work closely with faculty reps to ensure that those issues can get monitored and escalated if they need to be. Yeah, I think it'd be really good to have just one person in a department who's able to talk to the reps, and then, because that's a much more manageable group of people to be able to receive feedback from and engage with. So something I'd be really excited to work on in the future.
Yeah, I think the departmental rep is a fundamental. It's a necessary role. It bridges a gap between what is the existing structure. It's sort of a formalization of the academic rep who's on the DLTQC. I'm a DLTQC rep. So I feel like it would just, again, really push for improving the communication between students to reps, to department reps, to faculty reps, so that changes that we want could actually be seen. Yeah.
I love the enthusiasm. Yay. You've only got a couple more questions left and then we'll let you be free, I swear. So, and hopefully they're nice ones. So, your penultimate question is, how would you work with the postgraduate officer to ensure that all levels of students are represented when making decisions about changes to academic policies? And this is going to go Robbie, Helen, Star.
So, postgraduate engagement with student voice at the moment is something that we know is low and something that needs to be worked on. It's something that's very difficult to do, right? Everyone's gone off and they've got their supervisors, so they're just there, and if they have concerns, it's very easy to raise. So it's a difficult one to do, but I think, especially with taught master students, that a lot of education policy and stuff is going to affect them. So it's really important to be working closely with the postgraduate officer so that we can hear those voices about those issues and make sure that stuff is dealt with.
I can't say I know much about the current system between postgrads, but this is just something I would definitely consult with students, see what the students want for the integration between postgraduates and undergraduates, just making sure that communication is integrated, make sure that there are people to represent, make sure that there are postgraduate students to represent themselves in these discussions. Again, making sure that everyone's voice is heard.
Yeah, so a lot of issues that will affect undergraduates will also affect the postgraduates. So making sure that there is a streamlined way of making sure that we are able to be contacted. So making sure that there's a unified front so that the education officer isn't saying something that is completely different to what the postgraduate officer is, as that can be very confusing and no one will know what the hell is going on. It's not ideal, I promise. But making sure that whenever there's information about policy, that we highlight the stuff that is for perhaps both undergraduates and postgraduates, as well as highlighting stuff that only affects undergraduates and only affects postgraduates.
Okay, gorgeous. So last question before your final statement. Hopefully a nice one. Blue sky thinking. What would success look like after your year in role? And we're going to go Helen, Robbie, Star.
Success to me would be students feeling represented. I think that's as simple as it would go. Making sure that communication is improved, that I've truly pushed for the things that I want to push for, be that IMCs, accessibility, inclusion. I just want to see those things starting to move, starting to be in practice, continuing the work that's already been going on. And again, just making sure everyone can be heard.
And then it was Robbie.
Losing track there. So success would look like things changing and plans to start things changing. There's lots of issues on here, but some of them we can make headway on straight away, or we can create plans and really get the university to commit to going forwards with things like improving lecture recordings, past paper access, and something we spoke about earlier, changing unit evaluations is a big thing that I think could, take us a step forward to listening to feedback better. So, success for me would look like actually delivering on some of this stuff and having plans to deliver on it in the future.
Yeah, the utopian for me would be that there's no issues with being able to access education, or that everyone can get full marks on everything. I understand that is not realistic at all, but at least a step in that direction is what I would want. I'd want there to be maybe not that not necessarily that all the materials are freely accessible, but there is a plan in Liu in progress to make it so they are for that or that there is proper plans in place so that the visions are being continued is what I want.
Gorgeous answers. There you go. So the last thing is your final statements. So this is where you have 30 seconds to just kind of promote people to vote for you. If there's anything you want to brag about off your manifesto or anything you want to tie up from what you've talked about today, you can absolutely go for that, but you've only got 30 seconds, so it's got to be quick. And I can prompt you guys in turn, but it's going to be Star, Helen, Robbie. So if we start with Star.
Okay, so 30 seconds, that's not a lot of time. So I'm focusing on accessibility, making sure everyone can get the best out of their education, whether it's DAPs, IMCs, year board and placements, which I know we've not talked about, but there are the key parts that need to be focused on, looking at assessments and all that. And if you want to be a part of the change, then remember to hashtag start the change.
Then it's Helen.
Okay. Ultimately, I'm really proud of my work this year, pushing for change in Summit. I've also done some other random projects which I haven't mentioned yet. I'd like to give a shout out to Froom, which is a little project that I've played quite a significant part in the design and creation of. This is a tool for finding free rooms on campus that are not being used. So more on that on my socials. And ultimately, hashtag be heard with Helen.
And last but not least, Robbie.
I think any one of us up here would do a great job in education officer. I think we've all committed to wanting to improve various aspects of student life. What you've got to ask yourself now is, what are the specific issues that are going to quantifiably improve your student experience here, and who do you think is going to shout the loudest about them, who's specifically saying, I want to go and I want to improve this. So obviously come and talk to it. I could talk all day about any one of the points on my manifesto, so I really encourage people to come up and ask questions.
And that's all, folks.